Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Whole bunch of people sent me this story, including Chris, who said, Steve, I bet I'm one of 100 people to send this to you. Probably more than 100 by now, but yes, you were, and thank you very much. From the Associated Press, out of Detroit, my backyard. A teen was falling asleep during a courtroom field trip, and she ended up in handcuffs and jail clothing. It was a field trip. So this is from the Associated Press. A teenager on a field trip to see a Detroit court ended up in jail clothes and handcuffs because a judge said he didn't like her attitude on a field trip. The judge is Kenneth King. He asked other kids in the courtroom whether or not the 16-year-old should be taken to juvenile detention. That was reported by WXYZ TV Detroit. King, who works at the 36th District Court, defended his actions. I wanted this to look and feel very real to her, even though there's probably no real chance of me putting her in jail. There's probably no real chance of me putting her in jail. That was my own version of Scared Straight, he said. He's referring there to a documentary about teen offenders that was shot in New Jersey and was very controversial because many people didn't think that the show was actually 100% legit, and also it didn't help anything. They did studies and they found out the people who were quote-unquote scared straight were just as likely, if not more so, to reoffend than people who didn't go through the program. So the teen was viewing King's court as part of a visit put together by the Greening of Detroit, a nonprofit environmental group. During the visit, the judge noticed the girl falling asleep. And he said, "You fall asleep in my courtroom one more time, I'm going to put you in back. Understand?" The judge said, according to a video of his remarks. Of course, everything he's doing in the courtroom is being recorded by them video cameras. And I've been in the 36th District Court many, many times. It's one of the courts I spent the most time in over the years. King then had the girl change into jail clothes and put on some handcuffs. It doesn't say who actually put them on, it just says, and wear handcuffs. And the judge told the TV station, and this, by the way, is amazing that the guy doesn't yet realize what he did was wrong. It was her whole attitude and her whole disposition that disturbed me. I wanted to get through to her, show how serious this is and how you are to conduct yourself inside of a courtroom. How serious is a field trip again? I'm sorry. She's not charged with a crime. She's not before you as a litigant. She's on a field trip. Maybe she was falling asleep because she was tired. Maybe she was falling asleep because you were boring her. And here's something. If you are falling asleep right now, that's my fault. Okay? And if a judge is giving people a tour of his courtroom and people are falling asleep, that's his fault. I'm just telling you that's the way it is. But the sad part is that he overreacted and handcuffed her. It was her whole attitude and her whole disposition that disturbed me. I wanted to get through to her, show how serious this is. How serious is a field trip? When I was a little kid, let's see, we went to Detroit Zoo one time. That was pretty serious. Another field trip, we went to Boblo Island. Remember that one pretty well. Pretty sure we did a field trip to Greenfield Village. That was serious. Never did a field trip to a courthouse. So I'll admit we never did that. Never did that. The judge also threatened her with time in detention, that is juvenile detention, before releasing her. I'm surprised that since she was 16 years old that he didn't decide to treat her as an adult and threaten her with actual jail time. He said, "I'll do whatever needs to be done to reach these kids and make sure they don't end up in front of me." Okay, maybe we should start with the presumption that everybody's innocent until proven guilty, and especially those who aren't charged with crimes, perhaps shouldn't be treated like criminals or defendants. Because again, she's on a field trip. She's not a defendant. The Greening of Detroit released a statement saying the young lady was traumatized. Oh? Although the judge was trying to teach a lesson of respect, his methods were unacceptable. That's the chairperson of the organization speaking. The group of students should have been simply asked to leave the courtroom if he thought they were disrespectful. And that, of course, is the correct thing to have done. Another judge who was in a leadership post at the court released a statement Wednesday night saying that the judge's conduct does not reflect the standards we uphold at 36th District Court. I am committed to addressing this matter with the utmost diligence. There's no immediate response to a message from the AP seeking further comment from the judge. Meanwhile, Larry Dubin, a professor at the University of Detroit Mercy Law School, which is where I used to teach, said there were so many other ways in which to have helped that young girl learn. Meanwhile, a judge told WXYZ that he spoke to the girl's parents and offered to be a mentor. I can teach you to be like me. No, I don't. I don't think that's the correct thing to do there. And so I've mentioned before, I'm not a judge. I don't want to be a judge. If elected, I would not serve. However, I've been in front of enough judges to know what judges should and should not do. And so you might think, Steve, what would you do if you were giving a field trip to a bunch of high school age kids of your courtroom and you're the judge? I would tell all the kids to come into the courtroom and sit down in the gallery where the spectators sit. Before I was there, in other words, I would have the teacher told, bring these people in, and then I'll come in. And I'd have the bailiff go in, and as I walked in the courtroom, I'd have them say the old thing, all rise, and I'd, sit at the bench for a minute and sit down, everybody sit down, and I'd sit at the bench for a minute and talk to kids about what happens in the courtroom. What type of cases do I try? There's the jury box. There's where the witnesses sit. I'd start going through some of the mechanics of it. And then I'd also explain to them the interesting thing. I'd say, you may notice that when I walked in, the bailiff said, all rise. And I would like to point out to you that many people go, we all stand up for that judge. I'd like to point out something else to you, though, that when we have a jury trial and the jury walks in, the bailiff or I will say, jury's coming in, all rise. And I will stand up for the jury. So you understand that in the pecking order in this courtroom, top of the heap, the jury. Number 2, the judge. Number 3, the bailiff, probably, as to, who you should pay attention to. But I would explain that because I think it's an extremely important thing for people to understand. I'd probably also mention the fact that you've got civil cases and criminal cases and how those can both happen in the same courtroom. And I'd also probably point out the recording equipment and talk about how in the old days they had to actually sit there and type out everything as people spoke, even when they talked too fast like me. Okay? And then I'd probably ask if there's any questions or comments or anything people would like to say. And then I might think of some fun things that we could do. I might say, hey, does anybody want to be a witness? Get up here and testify. I'd say, okay, but if I looked around the room and I saw somebody falling asleep back there, I wouldn't get angry at them. I would take a cold, hard look at myself and go, okay, you're up here, you're on the bench, you're talking to a courtroom, and somebody in the courtroom is falling asleep. But they are not a litigant, they're not a participant, they are simply there on a field trip. And as a field trip, they're simply there to look at something and see it in real life as opposed to reading about it or watching a documentary about it. And so if somebody's falling asleep back there, you do what you can to wake them up. And now, since I've never been a judge, I can't speak to exactly what judges can and cannot do with authority, but I can speak to you about being a professor. I mentioned earlier I used to teach at a law school. Spent 10 years teaching 3 different classes. And I would occasionally see somebody nodding off in the back of the classroom, especially when I taught night classes. And I recognized the fact that many of the students taking night classes worked during the day. Some of them had families. In fact, I had a woman who came into my class on the first day of class and said, I have a question for you. I go, what's that? She said, I have a very small child. I think it was a daughter, but I could be wrong about that. She goes, and sometimes they have a hard time with daycare. Is it okay if I bring her into class? And I said, well behaved, not going to disrupt the class? Sure, I don't care. Why would I care? It's one more person for me to talk to. And she said, okay, I appreciate that. And I think 2 or 3 times that semester, she'd show up early with her daughter. They'd go sit off to the side, and her daughter would sit there and read books. And I forgot how old she was, elementary school, but I forgot exactly how old she was. But she'd sit there and read books. And I'd conduct class, and it was like she wasn't even there. But again, when I would see somebody nodding off in class, the first thing I do is just call on him. Mr. Smith, let me ask you a question. Somebody gets startled awake out of that semi-sleepy state you're in. Mr. Smith, let me ask you a question. Yes? Did you read the case, Smith versus Globe? Yes. Can you tell me what kind of entity is Globe? What is Globe? It's an insurance company, Mr. Lehto. Okay. Mr. Smith, what did he do? Oh, he bought a vehicle. So what's this case got to do with a insurance company? Well, he also bought a credit life disability policy with the car. Okay. I can wake the person up by just asking them questions. I don't need to call out the fact they're falling asleep. I don't need to threaten them. I don't need to yell at them. You just got to think about this a little bit, okay? The reason we're here is to learn, which, by the way, is the same reason you're at a field trip. So let's get back now to the young lady, 16 years old, who may have been falling asleep in class. Let's assume she was. Now, she was there to learn about the courtroom and the courthouse and the judge, what judges do and courts do, et cetera, et cetera. What did she take away from this trip? Well, that there's an out-of-control and extremely mean judge in the 36th District Court. There's actually a lot of judges down there. A lot of judges. Are they all like this guy? She doesn't know, but she probably thinks they are. It's a good chance, right? You met a crazy one. Maybe they're all crazy. So I often do stories where I leave names out, but Judge Kenneth King, I think, deserves to have his name in the story because that is unusual, what he did here. And don't get me wrong. If she had mouthed off to him, if she had done something terribly disruptive or outlandish, yeah, then you do something. Do you know what you do? You say, young lady, this is a courtroom. Out there is a hallway. The standard of decorum in the hallway is much lower than the courtroom. Do you want to stay in the courtroom or go stand in the hallway till we're done? Take your pick. That'd be okay. That'd be okay. But handcuffs and the orange? No. It's wrong. So Chris and everybody else, thanks for sending it. From the Associated Press, out of Detroit, a teen was falling asleep during a courtroom field trip, so she ended up in cuffs and jail clothing. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. One good thing about music, when it hits you, you feel no pain.